Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Jeff with AutoHunter.com, and today we're going to be looking at a 1984 Porsche 944. Now, if this car looks familiar, that's because it was featured with me on the Drivers of AutoHunter video, which if you want to hear the personal story about the car, that is the video for you to check out. But today we're going to be looking at the history and technical aspects of the Porsche 944. Now, to get started with that, I think one of the best places to start would be with its predecessor, the Porsche 924. So the Porsche 924 was developed by Porsche originally as intended for a Volkswagen product, and that was going to be a front-engine car similar to this one here. Now, a lot of the main differences come from the fact that the Porsche 924 was using mostly Volkswagen and Audi components, including an Audi-sourced 1.8-liter four-cylinder that would be used to produce the car for Volkswagen. Now, what had happened is Volkswagen had decided that they were not going to use the 924, and Porsche actually bought the 924 designs at all the prices and costs of engineering the car, and basically bought it back from Volkswagen to then produce it themselves. So the 924 was in production through the 70s and even into the early 80s, but Audi actually stopped production of the 1.8 liter, and then that is when Porsche decided that they would redo the front engine sports car, but they wanted to add all of their Porsche flair, thus introducing the Porsche 944. So this is an updated version essentially of the 924, but the main differences being all of the components and underpinnings are all Porsche based now. So that includes everything from the engine, we have the transaxle, new body styling. The 924 was a narrow body. You'll notice just looking at the exterior that this car has a series of wide body box flares that are very 80s-esque. So this car actually would have started, this is an American car, you can tell by some of the crash bumpers and things like that. The Euro cars had a more recessed bumper and some other different horsepower regulations and things like that. But the 944, as you see it here, was all produced as part of what is Porsche trying to redo the interior and everything, as essentially making it a Porsche, a true Porsche, so to speak. So to understand this at the time, Porsche thought they were heading away from the rear engine air-cooled aspects and moving to front-engined water-cooled cars like this. So also prior to the 944 would have been the Porsche 928. And the Porsche 928 was the flagship V8 powered Porsche. Yes, V8 powered front engine, essentially Grand Tour that was intended to replace the 911. And it was a fantastic car capable of holding 150 miles an hour, no problem. But that all changed later. They would find out the 911 would stay on. But in the meantime, we're going to be taking a look at this car here. So one of the things that makes this interesting is there is some 928 DNA in this car as well, actually, including the fact that this has what is essentially a 928 V8 cut in half. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at the power plant. So popping the hood here, this is an all aluminum 2.5 liter four cylinder. Now, this is an 84, which means the car is pre-turbo. So in about 85 and a half, the 944 would go through a facelift that mostly included interior updates, some other electrical wiring updates, but would retain the same 2.5 liter engine. But in 1986, that's when Porsche would introduce the Porsche 944 Turbo, which would have a whopping 260 horsepower and be a monster of a vehicle. Now, this car is an American car, like I mentioned earlier. So this is the same engine that you would find even in the Euro cars, but the main difference being that this has about 143 to 150 horsepower, and the Euro cars were generally rated a little bit higher, around the 161 horsepower, mostly due to some of the emissions differences, and they even had a better sounding exhaust because of some of the other restrictions and things that had changed at the time. Now, if you come and take a look over at the valve cover on this side, one of the interesting things that would change is the fact that this has the Porsche listed valve cover. So like I said, the 924 would actually have a Audi based engine. And so this was Porsche really wanting to put their actual engineering into it now that it was no longer a Volkswagen. And these were relatively affordable cars, being at the time that you could have bought one of these for about $20,000 would have been the MSRP when new back then, which is pretty cool. There were a lot of cars I know have had a ton of people talk to me about how their teachers should have had some of these, and just some various people even had some of these in high school. So these were regularly, essentially almost affordable Porsches back in the day, and there was even a time where the values got really low for these. So that's pretty interesting. This car does have cruise control, which was an option at the time. It also has AC, it's another option. And most importantly, we have this glorified windshield motor right here, which is what pops up these awesome pop-up headlights. So that's pretty interesting indeed. But that's essentially the engine bay of the 944, especially the non-turbo version. So this is the fastest, so to speak, 944 at the time. And the 1984 944 would actually win European Car of the Year, according to Car and Driver. So that's another pretty cool statistic, where it would later go head to head with the Chevrolet Camaro that also won American Car of the Year. So like I said, these are some of the American aspects here. The front crash bumpers, there's actually some loaded struts that sit behind here, and that's going to be what helps your impact, so to speak, for some of the crash regulations, which this personally looks a lot better than a lot of the Malaise era muscle cars you find that have extended bumpers that just don't quite fit in. Now, going around the car here, we have, again, a boxy flare, which would have not have been featured on the 924, but these were actually inspired by the 924 and later 944 race cars that actually went to Le Mans. So that's where a lot of this fits in. Same thing with the turbo edition of the 944, all inspired by Porsche's racing in Le Mans. So that makes this a true Porsche when you look at some of the racing heritage. Taking a look at the wheels equipped on this car, these are called Porsche cookie cutters. So what's interesting about these is these were only available on early 944s, specifically pre-85.5, which was that facelift that I was talking about. So at the time, the options were basically cookie cutters or Fuchs, which you could get equipped on the car, and then later cars would actually feature things like the phone dial wheels, eventually the DT90 wheels, and of course Fuchs were pretty much always an option. And they did come in some different colors and things like that. You have an antenna, and then moving on to the interior. So taking a look at this guy here, this is the interior of an early 944. So most importantly, what you'll notice is those gauges. Those gauges are specific to the early cars. They are similar to what you would find on a Porsche 924, although they are now yellow. They are switched up a little bit, and you'll notice how that tack actually goes down. And the reason for the tack going down is Porsche being Porsche, knowing that you're going to be racing it, so to speak. They made the tack go down so that way the top of the steering wheel wouldn't actually block the tack. This car also has a 5-speed manual transmission, and one of the weird things about this car that you may not find typical is the fact that the e-brake actually sits on the left side of the seat there. So that's another super quirky thing. Now, this car was actually supposedly sort of marketed as a usable sports car, but if you take a look in the back here, there's a set of back seats that are really not good for anything other than grocery bags. You could maybe fit a very young child in there, but it's just not very practical. And in this day and age, odds are if you own a 944, you probably don't need to use those back seats as your daily driver anyways. This car does have a sunroof as well, although there was a sunroof delete option. That's a pretty rare option, but as we come around to the back here, this, one of my favorite parts of the car. What's cool about this is a rubber foam wing. You can see that it has a lot of flex and give to it. What's super cool about this is very reminiscent to me when you think about things like the Porsche 911 Turbo. You have a lot of rubber wings and things like this, the whole Save the Whales campaign, which is super cool. And I think this has just more of that extra Porsche flair with no extra chrome. All of the trimming, including the 944 badge here, is all black. And we have a hatchback, so this whole thing lifts up, but the downside for that is this, being a lot of glass, superheats the rest of the car. So that's not a pleasant experience. If you sit this out in a hot day, you will be roasting when you get inside that afterwards. So hopefully you live at a cool location. Coming around to the rear of this, one of the things I want to point out, this is cool because it's a period correct sort of thing here, is this plate right here, right? So this plate is really special because this is not a factory option. This would have been installed by the dealer. So I'm forgetting the exact name for it. I believe it starts with a G. There is a German term that describes this plate here. And essentially what it is, it's a dealer installed plate. Originally from the factory, this is a little indent that would have been here, and the license plate would have been installed right here. So they add this on. There's a couple different versions I've seen, 944, Turbo, some say Porsche. There's a couple different versions, but whatever it is, this plate gets added on. Some people like it, some people don't. I've kind of left it on there because it's like a period correct thing, but it's kind of a cool detail, especially because we'll find that word for you and we'll put it on the screen there later. So that's pretty much it. That's a quick look, especially these wide fender flares and all the other goody details and stuff of the 944. So it's a pretty interesting look. It's a decently quick car. You get 0 to 60 in somewhere around the 8.5 seconds, which is pretty quick for the time. By modern standards, it's a little sluggish. You might get beat out by some Honda Civics and things, but nonetheless, it's pretty interesting. So that's going to be the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed that, throw us a like, we'd really appreciate it. And get subscribed, as you don't want to miss out future content as we release videos like this regularly. If you're looking to purchase a classic car for yourself, be sure to check out AutoHunter.com, which is our online auction. And I'll see you guys next time.